The Senior Bowl is in the books. How did Jaren Hall, Blake Freeland, and Puka Nacua stack up? And also, some major shade thrown Kedon Slovis' way by virtue of his former head coach. Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What is up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, your resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Always appreciate you guys checking out the show. We're always proud to be part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Of course, the motto is your team every day. And as such, we are your only daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. Title sponsor on today's show is our friends over at LinkedIn. With LinkedIn Jobs, you can hire qualified candidates more efficiently by matching open roles with people who have the skills, values, and experiences to help you achieve your 2023 goals. Post your job for free right now at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. All right, thanks again for joining us here, and let's dive right in and talk some BYU football. More importantly, former Cougars on their way to the pro ranks. The Senior Bowl is in the books. They had their annual showcase game on Saturday afternoon, and a little bit disappointing, honestly. I tuned into the game hoping to see guys like Jaren Hall, Puka Nacua show what they were able to do, but Puka Nacua did not play in the game, and Jaren Hall also sat out, and that was disappointing. Blake Freeland played at both right tackle and left tackle in this game, and I got to admit, I thought he did a fairly good job, all things considered. Throwing him in different positions, playing him in the right side, something he hadn't played since his freshman year at BYU, but also giving him opportunities to run different offensive sets, that type of stuff. It's always good experience for him. But I had a couple of you reach out, Jordan among them, who said, Jake, do you know what happened with Jaren Hall and Puka Nacua? And I'll be honest, right up front, I do not know. I talked to some of our folks at the Senior Bowl who were from the Locked On Podcast Network, and they were essentially mum's the word on what exactly went down. But the bigger thing during the Senior Bowl is, yes, playing in the Senior Bowl game is fun for you as a fan to tune in and watch them play. And obviously that's a disappointment in that fact. But the bigger story at hand here is that all three of these guys got the opportunity to go down and play in front of NFL talent evaluators, head coaches, GMs, scouts, and the like. And the more important thing, the other thing that needs to be looked at, and maybe is the most important part of the Senior Bowl, is the opportunity for guys like Jaren, Puka, and Blake to sit down with NFL franchises and begin interview process. They will, all three of them, in my opinion, be invited to the NFL Combine. I had a conversation with somebody who's far more in the know on terms of where guys are slated to go in the draft, and their comment to me was that all three guys at BYU did nothing to hurt their stock this week at the Senior Bowl. In fact, their point was that Puka Nacua was seemingly off a lot of draft boards going into the Senior Bowl, but he rocketed up it with just one stellar day. Obviously, the first day of practices, all of the storylines were, who's this Puka Nacua kid from BYU? And he's just showing out and showing everything he's capable of doing. I don't know if it was a minor injury that creeped up on him after that first day that caused him to sit out, but everything I heard is that all three of them are firmly on NFL draft boards at this point, and that's a very positive sign if you're a BYU fan, hoping to see all three of their names called in the NFL draft. Now, it's not a perfect science at the Senior Bowl. 87% roughly of guys invited to the Senior Bowl in the recent past have been taken in the next NFL draft. So there's pretty good odds that all three of them hear their name called coming up in late April, early May when the NFL draft takes place. But they still continue to have to do the work. They'll obviously be going to the NFL Combine coming up in Indianapolis, and that'll be kind of the next road marker, I guess not road mark, landmark, I should say, of where they need to go out and show their absolute best. They'll get right back to training, working on all the agility drills they'll be required to do, running 40s, 3-cone drills. Jaren will continue to work on throwing that NFL football, NFL size football. He struggled with that the first day, and he acknowledged that he had some struggles on the first day of the Senior Bowl, but he seemed to recover very nicely. And like I said, I don't know what knocked him out of the actual game portion of the Senior Bowl, but it sounds like, all things considered, the Senior Bowl venture for all three of them was went about as well as you possibly could have hoped for. And now, obviously, like I said, the NFL Combine is up next. Pro Day is after that. BYU's Pro Day is going to be March 24th, based on what we were told by BYU Sports Information last week. So that's always a big thing for the BYU Cougars, is seeing how many of these guys get the chance to go into the NFL and impress. The nice part is right now, the guys who are in the NFL, to a man, every single one of them seems to be outperforming or performing at the level that you would expect them to. And that's a positive sign for the BYU football program under Kalani Sitake. He's got a proven track record now as a head coach of putting guys into the National Football League and them succeeding at the highest levels. So obviously NFL teams are going to be more prone to take chances on BYU. And I don't have to remind you guys how recently that was simply not the case. Bronco Mendenhall really, in many ways, kind of torpedoed some guys with their NFL chances by saying that we don't necessarily focus on getting to the NFL here at BYU. We aspire for bigger things. Okay, that's not your decision to make if you're Bronco Mendenhall. You want to let your guys make that decision for themselves if they want to pursue the pro ranks in football or go pro in something else like the NCAA always crows about. So all in all, a good week at the Senior Bowl for all three of those former Cougars. The nice part is there's other guys who had opportunities at the NFLPA Bowl, Shrine Bowl, East-West Shrine Game, Hula Bowl for a guy like Chris Brooks. So all of these former Cougars, they're showing what they're capable of doing. And like I said, the next thing up for some of these guys, the three that went to the Senior Bowl most likely, are NFL Combine invitations. I'm going to start digging around and seeing if I can find out who exactly has received those Combine invites. And obviously, we'll be getting ready for Pro Day and looking forward to the NFL Draft. So, it's been a very, very fruitful week, I think, for those Cougars. Now, one other thing for you guys on the BYU football front is that when it comes to the pro ranks, the Super Bowl is coming up this week. Obviously, Andy Reid, the former BYU offensive lineman and graduate assistant, the head coach of the Kansas City Chiefs, he's got two former Cougars on his roster right now, as I should say, in Matt Bushman and Zane Anderson, both of them on the practice squads. Best of luck to them in this game upcoming, and we'll see how it all shakes out. It should be a fun week in the lead up to the Super Bowl and see if Andy Reid can collect his second Lombardi trophy as head coach of the Kansas City Chiefs. All right, coming up next, some major shade thrown the way of Kedon Slovis by virtue of his former head coach. I'm actually surprised this hasn't gotten out into more of the actual bigger realm of BYU fandom. We'll let you hear some comments from Pat Narduzzi that, man, they were spicy. We'll get to those in just a moment. First, a word on our friends over at LinkedIn. Of course, LinkedIn's been with us for many, many months now, my friends. And as a small business owner or hiring manager, you know that success in 2023 will all depend on the team members you surround yourself with. That's why you need to check out LinkedIn Jobs. With LinkedIn Jobs, you can hire qualified candidates more efficiently by matching open roles with people who have the skills, values, and experiences to help you achieve your goals this year. Best part is LinkedIn Jobs help you find the qualified candidates and track them to your open jobs with targeting tools. They go beyond the resume data by using insights from your job post company and their 875 million member profiles to put your job post in front of the most qualified candidates. And the best part is it helps you identify the most qualified candidates on LinkedIn Jobs and connect with them fast and for free. It's an all-in-one tool, my friends. You don't need to go to multiple websites. Trust LinkedIn Jobs to get the job done for you. That is why small businesses are rating LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs is helping you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free right now at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Thank you once again for checking out Locked On Cougars and being a part of the podcast every single day. Want to encourage you guys every day to check out our brand new podcast, Locked On College Basketball. It's everything you need to know about college hoops in one place. Hear from big-name experts, insiders, coaches, and players alike. Locked On College Basketball is available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. All right. So I was sent this by Nick Farabaugh, who is the host of Locked On Pitt covering the Panthers. Actually was recently on this podcast talking about what Kedon Slovis can offer to the BYU football program. Well, Nick was fairly, I thought, very positive in his assessment of what Kedon Slovis can bring to BYU if he can harness more of what he showed from his time at USC versus what he showed during his time at Pitt. Well, per Pitt head coach Pat Narduzzi, well, apparently they added Phil Dracovic from Boston College, formerly of Notre Dame, to their roster to replace Slovis in theory this upcoming season. And he was on Sirius XM ACC radio. This goes back, I think, last week. It might have been on, I think it was Wednesday or Thursday. Nick sent this to me and said, hey, you might find some use for this. Let's let you hear the comments and we'll react to them afterwards.
coach. When did you know that this was going to be the potential for your, getting him to Pitt? How did that process go down?
He was a guy that went in the portal, and again, it's been a while here. I'm moving on, but I think he was in the portal, obviously, and obviously he's a Pittsburgh kid, and we recruited him when he went to Notre Dame. We recruited him, although he got in the transfer portal, or whatever it was called back then 2 years ago. He got in that like mid-January, which was really late for us. We had started school already, and we'd already taken a quarterback at the mid-year when that had happened. And we had Kenny Pickett, who was a pretty darn good quarterback here. So he made a great decision going up to Boston. But we knew there was a chance we were going to lose our quarterback. We knew there was a chance that maybe we wanted to lose our quarterback. And we had some hard conversations, and then we had an opportunity to bring Phil in, and I think he's been a great addition. We got Chris Ballou as well. I think is going to be a great addition. They're both here in spring ball and in winter conditioning right now, getting ready to roll, and we're excited about what that quarterback room looks like.
Once he's in your building and you're seeing him kind of day to day, what have you learned about Phil that was different that you may not have known before?
Well, again, today's Wednesday, February 1st. This is my third day really back in the office on a normal week because I've been on the road, really since the beginning of January. So just getting back in with our kids, I haven't had a chance to really watch them run much. Never seen him throw a ball yet. So as far as just evaluating where he is physically, obviously he's big, he's mature, and the things you hear out of the weight room from our strength coach is just like, this guy's a leader. He's going from rack to rack down there. He just got here, and he's going rack to rack motivating people down there. Like we haven't had that since Kenny Pickett, and that's the most impressive thing that you hear is just what is he doing now? Because we're not on the field, we're not running the offense. But it's those things that we have lacked for the last year, and having that guy that can bring everybody together, that is got that, he's that emotional leader. I think that's going to be the thing that we gain here.
All right, Coach. Well, that's Pat Narduzzi on Sirius XM ACC Radio last week, and maybe we wanted to lose our quarterback. Okay. Petty much. Can't even mention Kedon Slovis by name. He can go back and talk about Kenny Pickett. He can talk about Phil Jurkovec. He can talk about Phil Jurkovec going from rack to rack, motivating his guys. Whew. All right. So either A, apparently Kedon Slovis is not the leader that BYU believes he is when they brought him in via the transfer portal here. B, this is a coach in Pat Narduzzi, if many of you will recall, last year essentially put USC on blast for bringing in Jordan Addison via the transfer portal by giving him NIL money. C, he's trying to essentially downgrade his former quarterback to make his current quarterback look better. Any of the above and a variety of other things could be in play here with why Pat Narduzzi would make those type of comments. But okay, well, I don't necessarily know where to go with this, but send those comments. And I got to say this, Pat Narduzzi is a guy who just comes off as a guy that just gets really hot under the collar when players decide to leave his program. He's a guy that believes in program loyalty, wants guys that are going to stick with Pitt. I get all that, and I can respect that. It seems like that's the way he approaches things. But when he opens his mouth to talk about it, he says some pretty asinine things. And what he said right there screams to me a guy who has been burned by the Jordan Addison situation, doesn't feel like the offense performed the way he expected it to this past year. But he is the guy, speaking of Pat Narduzzi, who decided to dump a offensive coordinator who had put prolific offenses on the field. Is a big reason why it's Mark Whipple was their offensive coordinator, who is the reason why that Kenny Pickett was an NFL draft pick, a first-round draft pick by the Pittsburgh Steelers, was a big reason why that guy got drafted. He decided, Pat Narduzzi did, that it wasn't good enough for him. It's not the kind of offense that he wanted to run. So he decides to have Mark Whipple, I think he resigned his position, landed at Nebraska, and he brought in a new offensive coordinator who's going to be more of a run-heavy type offensive coordinator. We had, like I said, Nick Farabaugh from Locked On Pitt and talked about that, how they kind of went to more of a rush offense. But Jeff Hansen from Cougar Sports Insider tweeted this out. This actually came out this evening. Sunday night as I'm recording this. It says, reason to be confident that Kedon Slovis will play better in 2023 did in 2022, a thread. Kedon Slovis was under pressure on 112 of 336 dropbacks last year at Pitt. That's almost 33%. It's a third of the time he was under pressure. For comparison, as he says, Jaren Hall is pressured on just 88 of 413 dropbacks last year at BYU. He also adds this: Slovis's completion percentage was just 58.6% last year. His catchable percentage, however, was 84%. Now, for comparison's sake, Hall completed 66 of his passes, so a full 8 points higher almost, while 84.9% of his passes were catchable. So their catchable pass number is about the same, speaking of Slovis and Jaren Hall, but the completion percentage for Kedon Slovis was down. So this is an interesting number, and you can go read the rest of Jeff's thing. You can follow him at Rakoto10, Rakoto 10 on Twitter to read more about this. He also mentions that during 3 years at USC, Slovis earned a positive EPA extra points added rating on 50.13% of his passes. Last year at Pitt, that dropped to 44.1% of his passes. And then he says from 2019 to 2022, Jaren Hall and Zach Wilson had a positive EPA on 50.08 passes combined. So his BYU offense is much better than 2022 Pitt. And that would indicate that you can expect that Kedon Slovis, in theory, should be better at BYU this year. And Pat Narduzzi, this is going to be stuff that people are going to use against him in recruiting. And there will still be kids that pick Pitt. I get all that. He mentioned that Phil Dracovic is a kid from the Pittsburgh area. They were bringing him home in essence, but to not even name your former quarterback, that you were that like jaded or butthurt or whatever adjective you want to use there about this guy who left your program. It's spicy to have him say something like that. And it's obviously locker room fodder. It's going to be bulletin board material. Too bad Pitt and BYU won't play because, man, that would be fun. But nonetheless, what I take away from this is I think that a guy like Pat Narduzzi comes off as a little bit of a hater. And that's the thing about this. And that era of coaching where you essentially the coach is the end-all be-all, that's no longer the way when it comes to coaching in the college ranks. You've got to be more of a player's coach. And that's what Kalani Sitake has prided himself on being. And I'll tell you, to a man, I almost guarantee almost every BYU player that's been through that program in the last 7 years would tell you that Kalani cares first and foremost for the players, sometimes to a fault. There have been issues that have come as a result of Kalani being more player-oriented than him being, I'm the grand poobah as a head coach here, and we're going to run things my way. Pat Narduzzi runs it more of like, I'm the king here and you are my subjects and I will do as I see fit. So Pat Narduzzi, I don't know where you get off saying that about a former quarterback of yours. Your offensive line, according to what Jeff tweeted out, and I saw with my own eyes, I've actually watched some of the film from Kedon Slovis. The offensive line at Pitt just failed a guy like Kedon Slovis more often than not. The wide receiving core was not as good as it had been. Obviously, losing a guy like the Blitnikoff Award winner in Jordan Addison obviously hurts you when you're a quarterback like Kedon Slovis. But when you're throwing the same amount of catchable passes that a guy like Jaren Hall is, and Jaren Hall's on his way to the NFL, but your completion percentage is a full 8 percentage points lower, well, there's other things at play, it feels like. And by the way, that pressured number, you look at that, it was almost 100 more dropbacks for Jaren Hall, and he was pressured far, far less than a guy like Kedon Slovis. So there is hope that Kedon Slovis can have more of a rebound / up. I'm going to try and say an upgraded, I don't know, a more positive season in a BYU uniform than what Kedon Slovis did for BYU, but than what Kedon Slovis did for Pitt, excuse me. But at the same time, maybe there is a kernel of truth in there. Maybe Pitt did want to quote unquote lose their quarterback. We had some hard discussions about this. Now, the thing about this is that the more I think about this, it's Pat Narduzzi being he's a guy who, he said this, he's not the biggest fan of the transfer portal. And I think the more he gets burned, the more he's going to put his foot in his mouth on stuff like this. And maybe Pitt has a great year with Phil Dracovic under center, but at the same time, if Kedon Slovis goes out and lights it up for BYU, those statements will only come off as more of just hater type statements from a former head coach of Kedon Slovis's. So, man, that was when I heard that clip. Like I said, Nick sent it to me. He's like, "Hey, this is pretty good. You can probably use it." So I'm like, "Yeah, I'll absolutely be using that," and I'll make sure to link it on Twitter, etc., where you guys can find it. And please, you can tag Pat Narduzzi all you want, but just crazy stuff coming out of the mouth of a head coach of a former player of his who gave his heart and soul to that program. And that's the thing about this. I know it was only 1 year for Kedon Slovis at Pitt, but he went there with good intentions. He went there with good intentions of being the next guy following Kenny Pickett to the NFL. Did it work out? No, it didn't. So that's why he's landed at BYU now and hoping that BYU can kind of reignite his chances of making to the NFL. But it comes off as a really bad look for Pat Narduzzi. But I'm just a lowly podcaster in Salt Lake City, Utah, who doesn't necessarily agree with how Pat Narduzzi operates when he opens his big mouth. All right, coming up here in just a minute, we'll talk a little bit more about BYU basketball. A good weekend for the BYU Cougars on the hardwoods. What can this mean for BYU as they move forward here in the stretch run of the season? We'll get into more of that in just a moment. First off, a word on our friends over at Built Bar. Are you looking for a delicious treat but don't want all the fat and calories? I got the answer for you guys. It's our friends over at Built Bars. The best part about Built Bars, covered in 100% real chocolate. They're chewy. The best part is they're easy to eat. And the best part is they taste delicious. They're the closest thing to a candy bar that I have ever had. And the best part is they come in unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, coconut almond, and on down the list. My all-time favorite is still the orange flavor, orange chocolate. Man, that's a great flavor. But I love the fact that right now Built Bar has given you multiple ways to get Built Bars into your home. You can still go online to built.com and place your order there and wait for it to ship to your house. But if you need the Built Bars now, stop by your local Smith's or your local Sam's Club and pick them up right away. The best part is at Smith's, you can get 4-bar packs of different flavors. They're available now. You can grab them right off the shelf, check out on your way home, and you got those Built Bars right there. Or if you want more of a bigger pack, like a bulk pack, like I would go for, Sam's Club, 13-bar packs available at your local Sam's Club now. Stop in, pick them up today. And once again, also, if you don't mind waiting a little bit, you can still go to built.com and place your order there. While you're at built.com, you can still use the promo code LOCKEDON15. That's LOCKEDON15 for 15% off your order. Make sure if you're online at built.com, order a box of the Cougar Tail flavors, because those directly impact and benefit the BYU football program and the BYU athletic department. So I'd encourage you guys to give those bad boys a shot. So once again, the local Smith's or Sam's Club got the options for you guys, or built.com. Enjoy the best tasting protein bars and do it with our friends at Built Bar. Also brought to you today by our friends over at Utah Community Credit Union. At UCCU, love where you bank is a promise, my friends, made by a local not-for-profit financial institution dedicated to helping families improve their financial lives. UCCU delivers on that promise with pioneering new technologies to make banking safer, easier, and more convenient. The best part is they're creating new products and services that add real value to their members. They can provide easy access to real local human beings who always give a personal help or assistance. I can attest to this. I have been a UCCU when we're trying to aficionado. I've been a customer of theirs my entire life, 30 plus years. So the best part is there are many reasons to love banking with UCCU. And right now, UCCU will share 14 reasons to love where you bank. And here's the best part. They're giving away a stay at the Grand America Hotel, complete with a visit to the Grand Spa until Valentine's Day, both on Facebook and Instagram. See why you'll love banking with UCCU. When you see a post, love it, and you'll be automatically entered to win that Grand America experience. Enter each day. Visit UCCU's Facebook or Instagram pages now until Valentine's Day and enter to win. That's UCCU. Love where you bank. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Always appreciate you guys being a part of the show. If you have comments, concerns, advertising inquiries, you can reach out to the show anytime via social media, Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Search out Locked On Cougars. Drop a comment in the YouTube comments if you happen to be watching this on YouTube. It's right below the video here. If you've not done so already, subscribe, rate, review, enable notifications, do all that big stuff to help us build this audience right here on the internet. But at the same time, you also can email the show. LockedOnBYU@gmail.com is the email address. Of nothing more than to have you guys have your say on this podcast, more so than we already do. I think we have a pretty good engagement with you, the fans, but more engagement's always a good thing. But before we go on today's show, a couple of notes for you guys before we go out the door. Let's start off with this. BYU will be holding an annual spring scrimmage opportunity for you to watch the current BYU Cougars in action, and then also watch former Cougars of yesteryear participate in their annual alumni game they started last year. That'll be taking place on March 31st, a Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock. There'll be a public spring scrimmage, followed by the return of the alumni game at 5 p.m. Mountain Time on March 31st. Gates at Lavelle Edwards Stadium will open at 2 o'clock. Both events are free to the public, and they'll both be broadcast live on BYU TV. Should be a fun time. We encourage you to get that on your calendar. If you have plenty of time now to make arrangements for that, and it should be a fun Friday afternoon / evening. out there at LES is my sincere hope that we get some good weather that day. I'm just hoping that it's nice and sunny, nice pleasant temperature, and we can go have some fun and watch former Cougars do work out there at LES. Now, the other thing we need to talk about here is BYU men's basketball. Had a great weekend, winning both games in West Coast Conference play this past weekend. A 28-point blowout of LMU, very impressive on Thursday night. They followed that up with an 81-66 win over Pacific in the Marriott Center. And by the way, Pacific made this a little scrappy early on for BYU, but the more important thing for BYU in this game was that their defense came to play. That's the nice part. They built as big as a 24-point lead late in the second half. There was some lipstick put on the pig by the Tigers late in this one. Fousseyni Traore got double-doubles from Fousseyni Traore had a double-double, I should say. Gideon George also had a double-double. Foose had 19 points and 12 rebounds. George had 12 points and 10 rebounds. And the nice part is 17 of those points for Foose came in the second half. That was the thing, is he really came alive in the back end of this game to really open it up for the Cougars. Now, the other thing I need to talk about here is that the last two games for BYU, they have a combined turnover number of 16. That is 8 per game. This is a BYU men's basketball team that has had an average of 16 plus per game most of the season. When BYU cuts down on their turnovers, they are as good as anybody in the West Coast Conference. Now, the other thing they also need to rely on is having consistent shooting, and they have gotten that the past two games. It's had been pretty consistent offense and the ability to really get after it. There was some hope that maybe a guy like Trevin Nell could come in and help resurrect BYU's three-point shooting, but Mark Pope essentially said that he is done for the year at this point. He'll have 2 years of eligibility remaining and beyond this, recovering from that shoulder surgery. So you're essentially rolling with what you got right now on this BYU roster. And is it good enough to win the West Coast Conference tournament? I'm not convinced that it is, but if you get hot at the right time, crazier things have happened. That's the thing about this. You will go to Las Vegas as a BYU Cougar, speaking of the BYU men's basketball program, believing that the tournament might be as open as it has been in many, many years, because LMU proved that Gonzaga is mortal. BYU also proved that. BYU should have beaten them at home. They should have beaten St. Mary's at home. They should have at least 2 more West Coast Conference wins on their tally had they been able to finish a little bit better against the top 2 dogs in the West Coast Conference. Alas, now you're going to have a very, very difficult slate ahead. You head to Gonzaga on Saturday night for your final visit to the kennel as members of the West Coast Conference. Can you finish the job then? We're going to find out. But BYU, the way they have played the last 2 games, gives me a little more hope that BYU might be rounding into form as the season is coming to a pretty quick close here. It's the final month of the season. This is the quote unquote fourth quarter of the college hoop season. You want to be playing your best basketball now and obviously have that carry over into later this month and early next month in the West Coast Conference tournament. Because if you can go to Las Vegas, whether you're the 3 seed, the 4 seed, you're going to be playing in that quarterfinal matchup with the hope of making it to the semifinals on Monday night to play either St. Mary's or Gonzaga, who are going to lock up those double buys already into the semis. And you're going to have to win 3 games. You'll obviously probably be playing that Saturday night, going into Monday night, and then hoping to make it to Tuesday night and that West Coast Conference tournament final. But you've got to be playing your best basketball at that point. And this should be a total opportunity for BYU over the next 2 to 3 weeks in the final stanza of their West Coast Conference season to get themselves right. Keep the turnovers at a minimum. Like I said, 9 turnovers against Pacific, 7 against LMU. That's the number I have been hoping, praying, and begging for from this BYU men's basketball team. They got back to playing better defense as well in the last 2 games. That was something that when they had that 9-game win streak earlier on this season, this was a team that was getting it done on the defensive side of the defensive side of the glass, now the defensive side of the court, and making it very difficult for opposing teams to score on them. They need to do more of that. And as they continue to work on that side of the hoop, turnovers are going to come, transition opportunities, rebound the ball at a high level. All of that will combine into making this BYU team much more formidable in the final stanza of the regular season and also into the postseason if they can achieve that. I think the NIT is still the most likely destination for BYU in their postseason upcoming this year, barring them winning the West Coast Conference tournament and punching their ticket via an automatic berth into March Madness. But the positive right now for BYU is these last 2 games have given me personally hope that BYU may be figuring some things out. Now, I have said that before. I've been on this podcast and said that, man, they're giving me some hope. I think they've got a chance here. And then they go out and yak it up and make it look absolutely miserable. And you're like, okay, what just happened here? So The hope is that BYU will continue to carry the momentum they took from these past 2 games against Pacific and also against LMU into their upcoming games. They still have to go to Gonzaga. They still have to go to St. Mary's. They've got the very, very tough closing slate of games here in West Coast Conference play, but this is when you're going to prove yourselves. If you can go pick up a couple of wins that people are completely not expecting for you, well, anything could happen once you get to March and obviously into the West Coast Conference tournament, but you've got to continue to do the things you've been doing leading up to this, and that's going to be a big key for BYU men's basketball's chances. All right. That's going to do it for this Monday edition of the show. So a big thank you to all of you for your support of the podcast. As always, hope you all are doing fantastic out there. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Now I want to encourage you guys to make your second listen, our friends over at the Locked On Big 12 podcast. Get caught up on the weekend that it was in Big 12 sports. I apologize, by getting over and checking out the Locked On Big 12 podcast. Josh Neighbors does a great job. It's available on YouTube. It's also available wherever you get your podcasts, all of those places for free. All right, my friends, have a great rest of your day. This has been the Locked On Cougars podcast. See ya.